Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Populism has become one of the defining forces in European politics, reshaping institutions, challenging mainstream parties and influencing debates on migration, climate and security. In the 2024 European elections, populist parties captured more than a third of seats in the European Parliament, reflecting their growing strength. Separately, Poland's President Karol Nawrocki has returned from Washington with security guarantees from Donald Trump, but comes home to a constitutional clash. Joining us to explore these questions is Professor Wawrzyniec Konarski of Vistula University. I thought I had your name down, my apologies. So, thank you for taking the time, Professor. Tell me, let's start with the populism issue. We use it commonly, and we hear it all the time. Let's start by defining what populism means.
There's a problem in the doctrine because there are some researchers who might be ready to say that populism is a type of the ideology. But I'm not sharing this point. I think the populism is mostly a sort of the amalgamation of different ideologies, quite often depending on the certain traditions we may notice within the certain territories of the world. If we talk about populism in current Europe, definitely it might be defined, and it is in fact defined, as a right-wing phenomenon. Phenomenon is very strongly ethno-nationalistic and also xenophobic, oriented towards the elimination, I hope not in a physical way, but definitely by legal different regulations, people who are not required within certain societies. And we may notice right now that the populism understood in this way is overwhelmingly growing in such states like France, Britain, like, of course, Germany. But I will also add the populism importance, which is quite well visible in the Netherlands and also Belgium. So this is a problem understood as the sort of the phenomenon which may, I would say, ruin some of the elements of the understanding of Europe as a continent definitely friendly towards different people saying and talking different languages.
Well, what's driving it? Because it's shifted, hasn't it, in the last few years? What has driven that change?
Perhaps quite many societies are disappointed within some of the tendencies which have been developed in Europe after the Second World War. The transnational concept, of course, European Union, is definitely in a certain crisis, I would say, in legal and constitutional as well, because there are some specific visions toward what direction EU might be ready to be developed in the future. This is the problem. Also the...
So lack of national identity?
I mean, the national identity is changing, but this is quite a normal process for Homo sapiens as we are. But simultaneously, we are also right now in the certain turbulent times, depending what are our thoughts towards such issues like state, like religion, like law, like traditional institutions in a certain state. In fact, we are having this type of the crisis, which I can call as the institutional one, and this is very widely visible right now in Europe. And what is mostly dangerous, that those countries, I would rather call the term state because it's a legal term, those states which are normally perceived as the most important or leading within some of the tendencies describing Europe as a certain entity are really in a deep crisis because traditional elites are unable to find certain answers to some of the demands from people who are disappointed with the democracy. Democracy sometimes is too much plutocratic, definitely less meritocratic, and I would say also democracy today is having some problems, especially with the representation and also we are quite strongly plugged into some of the tendencies which are arranged by the technological invention.
So what is it that the populists are looking for and are not getting from democracy?
The most interesting with the populism lies in the fact that populism is the type of the amalgamation of the ideology which is absolutely unable to answer all of those questions. Populism, however, instrumentally is well prepared to mobilize people in its very strongly anti-elitist assumption. And it means those elites, which are too much plutocratic, as I said already, they're unable to find the proper and quick and especially effective and efficient answer. And because of that, some of the populistic leaders, they may offer very simple recipes what to do in order, of course, to make people closer with the institution of the state. But of course, it is not true, because in fact, state is too much complicated structure, which is always a sort of the coercion, because state is a coercive entity, definitely, but coercion does not mean the physical coercion. It's, for instance, legal coercion. So from this point of view, populistic leaders, they are going to use this argumentation against the state as too much coercive. From the other side, those elites are too much involved in the amalgamation of politics, different types of the activities, and I'm afraid also money. Money is something which, as we know, makes the world all go round,
right.
But if it is combined with the politics, it may finally come to some very dangerous tendencies.
Right. Okay. So, well, we shall wait and see what the populist solutions are in Europe. I'd like to move on now.
Obviously, not far-sighted, but short-sighted. That's the issue.
Right. Well, I'd like to move on to President Nawrocki's visit to the United States. He came back from the US with some reassurances from President Trump regarding keeping American troops in Poland, and also an invitation for Poland to join the G20. How do you see the results of that meeting?
I would say in a bit ambiguous way, because first of all, President Nawrocki, and according to the Polish constitutional law, is not in a position to be very much active within the foreign policy of Poland, because this type of the endeavors and activities, according to the constitution, is absolutely in the hands of the government and Prime Minister. Which means we are definitely much more a parliamentary cabinet type of the system, and we're having no any common and typical features of the, I wouldn't say even presidentials, because we don't have in Europe any type of the presidential systems at all. We are having some elements of the stronger position of president, for instance, in France, which is a semi-presidential system, as we know, but also in Finland. And Finland, for instance, traditionally is a state oriented strongly on the role of the president, who has been always, after the Second World War, an important factor in the decision-making processes towards the foreign policy, coming from Paasikivi through Kekkonen until now.
Right.
This is not the Polish case, of course.
So what should the President Nawrocki have done when he was invited by Trump? Should he have taken, for example, members of the government with him?
Absolutely, yes. Because according to the Polish constitution and according to the Polish customs, there is a government which has to be consulted always by the president. This is said clearly in article number 133 and 146, which means president should obey these regulations whenever he plans to go abroad, and of course to undertake any actions which might finally serve as actions towards the Polish security. And this is something which is absolutely, and I said clearly stated in the constitution.
Although people generally, I mean, Prime Minister Tusk, the Foreign Secretary, they're very pleased with the outcomes. So all's well that ends well, isn't it, Professor?
I mean, they're very pleased because this is just the beginning of the term of the office of President Nawrocki. Everyone is waiting what's going to be done by him in the future. He is not an experienced person. I'm a deeply experienced person in foreign policy. First of all, Mr. Nawrocki, Sikorski, of course, and Tusk, which means, Nawrocki is still a person who should be ready to share at least some of his initiatives and consult them with the government, because it may finally also produce a good reputation for Poland as the active participant in the international politics. This is also something which is, a basis for the producing Polish raison d'etat.
Right, so let's focus on the invitation to join the G20. The United States is going to be taking over the presidency of the G20, and the president of that organization invites other countries to join, which is what President Trump has just done. How would that work? How would Poland's representation at the G20 work? Who would be involved?
I think that, generally speaking, this type of the initiative and invitation is absolutely a good sign for Poland. But it's in fact not a good sign for the opposition of today, because opposition, as we definitely know, has been very strongly critical towards all of the economic types of the policy undertaken by the government right now. So when President Trump invited Poland to take part in the G20, it means, finally and logically, that Poland's economy is in a good shape, not in a bad, as it is said by the opposition.
Right, so hopefully this is actually a good sign, and we shall see in the long term how the constitutional clash works out. Professor, unfortunately we're going to have to end it there, but thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away though, lots more coming up. Goodbye.